So I just heard a little bit about this Anna. She supposedly was a Supreme Court justice in Alaska. Um, I never actually heard any type of judge actually agreeing to what I researched. All right. Now, on my research, I could be wrong, but I never look straight forward. I always look around me, be able to protect myself by any means necessary. So I'm not for her or against her, but I would definitely take it into consideration, whatever the rest of this she says, right? And I want to share this with y'all, but this is more along the lines for my documents, so I can. I have a tendency to kind of look at things about 4 times to really understand and maybe look up words, definition words that they use, and see what happens. I'm not an attorney, so do not take this advice as for me or for this video. Always consult into an attorney to work on your behalf if necessary. Alright, this is more along the lines of a learning video, so just take it as such. It's a learning video. Maybe you get something out of it, maybe you won't. Alrighty.
And now they're bankrupt. So their secondary creditors are coming after Americans under all these false presumptions. And those gigantic property tax bills, that was secondary creditors coming in and operating under the guise of U.S. trustees to assess all of this extra property tax against anybody's name that they had on the tax rolls. And we had to go in and operate the international level of the existing government, which is the United States of America unincorporated. We had to go in and protest, object, bring suit, and shut down those kinds of claims. And if we hadn't done that, everybody in America by now would be getting these gigantic tax bills. Now they're trying to phase it in and get their way anyway by beginning a more gradual approach. And so one of the gentlemen here showed me today an announcement that their property taxes are going up by 49% over 5 years. And this has all basically been foisted off on people by fraud, by false claims in commerce. And it's a very serious situation. It's something that we're dealing with as best we can, but it's going to require a lot of action by a lot of people to band together and say no to this and bring forward the kinds of actions that are necessary. And, you know, I'm looking around here and there's been a lot of discussion about the need for younger people to get involved. Well, I'll tell you what, the younger people need to get involved because they're the ones that are going to bear the brunt of this. So, but that's all the bad news. And that's the motivation. Okay? This is why it's urgent that everybody get clued in and start taking action in their own behalf. But it's also why we need to get active and take action in behalf of our counties and our states. Because if we don't, the secondary creditors of those bankruptcies are going to come in here and they're going to own everything and we're going to own nothing. And they even had it set up so that they had their commercial mercenary armies already set up here, ready to go. So I'm sure some of you have seen articles on the web where, you know, the FEMA had invested millions of body bags and billions of rounds of ammunition. They were going to use these agencies as basically mercenary armies on our soil to come evict us from our homes and businesses and resettle us, just like the British government did in Ireland in the 1850s. They thought they were going to get away with this. And they almost did. You know, if we hadn't been awake and hadn't raised our hands and said, uh-oh, no. If we hadn't given civil orders to the Joint Chiefs of Staff back in 2014, they would have gotten away with this. So we're dealing with some very disreputable, very criminal elements that have been hijacking our government for 150 years. And this is all the bad news. I do have good news. First and foremost of the good news is that we have been able to stop them. We have been able to operate the United States of America unincorporated is still standing. It is still populated. We are still here and we are still holding our ground. We're still objecting to all this. We've still brought forward all of the court battles. We have court cases in 6 major courts worldwide. We have gone to Rome. We have pressed our claims. We have done everything necessary to make sure that nothing bad happens to the American people. But I just felt like you all needed to know this is a very serious situation we're in, and we need to really pay attention. And when you get these gigantic tax bills, you'll know what the presumptions are that they're using to assess you 49% more over a course of 5 years. Or they're sending you a suddenly out of the blue a gigantic tax bill for, $20, $30, $40, $100,000 that you're supposed to just pull out of your pocket and hand over to them. It's the secondary creditors of these bankrupt federal corporations. Now, what can you do for your own families? All right, this goes to the heart of the concept of capacity. Now, we all work in different capacities. You might be here today as a member of this Republic Congress, right? That's a capacity. It's an office or a job that you do. You might also have a capacity as a grandma, as I do. You might have a capacity as a waitress at a charity function. Well, we all have different capacities, and so we all have different persons. Your trade name that your parents gave you when you were born is a capacity. That's your trade name that you use in public when you're standing on the land jurisdiction of the state where you were born. Unfortunately, there's a little oddball thing in the law that also makes it the name of a foreign situs trust when you're operating in the international jurisdiction of the sea. And back in 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt pulled off the heist of heists, the biggest crime in history, when he presumed upon the American people to declare that your trade names were actually the names of foreign situs trusts in the international jurisdiction of the sea. He removed all of our trade names to international jurisdiction with the stroke of a pen, which is known as an unlawful conversion. And if you go back and look at the complaint that was filed by Congressman Louis T. McFadden, who was co-chair of the House Banking Committee at that time, you'll see that he characterized it as unlawful conversion. So suddenly, instead of operating on the land and with all of the guarantees that you are owed as Americans, you were suddenly in the international jurisdiction of the sea, and you were being treated as territorial citizens. Now, the word citizen is a tricky word. Citizen implies that you are under obligation to the government, as in obligation to serve the government. All right? So when you say you're a citizen of Texas, you're saying, I have an obligation to Texas, to serve the government of Texas. And when you say I'm a citizen of the United States, I'm under obligation to obey the laws and serve the interests and serve the duties of the United States. But we don't know what United States they're talking about. And they just kind of shimmy-shafted around on that, too. We think of the United States as America, the 50 states, right? Well, some of you were watching when President Obama referred to the 57 states. And everybody was laughing and saying, well, doesn't he know that there's only 50 states? Well, you see, he wasn't talking about our states. He wasn't talking about the national states, the ones that are mothballed. He was talking about the territorial states. And there are 57 territorial states. And we're all familiar with those territorial states. You've seen territorial states all your lives. Those are the ones that are using the upper lowercase state of Washington, state of Florida, state of Georgia. That's a territorial state. You've also seen municipal states of states. And those are the ones that are using the all-capital names. State of Washington, state of Idaho, state of Ohio. Those are all municipal state of states. So he was talking about the territorial state of states. He wasn't talking about our states. Why would he be talking about our states? Our states have been mothballed since 1860. He's running a completely different government than what we think he's running. Or he was, I should say. Thank God. So what we think of as the federal government is actually two different entities, a territorial government and a municipal government, with no national government on the board. That's why when you look out and you are listening to international news, you'll hear people like Karen Hood saying that our government is in an abeyance. It's being held aside as it might come back at some point in the future, but it isn't here now. That's what they're saying. Our national government has been in abeyance. It's been mothballed for decades. I know. I can see some of you are looking at me and you're going, oh my, is this even real? Could this be possible? But yes, this is possible, and in fact, this is what's going on. And that's what we're fighting with every day. That's what I'm contesting with every day, is that we need to bring our national government back into full operation. And the reason that we need to bring our government back into full operation right now is that if we don't, there will be no government here except U.S. bankruptcy trustees acting in behalf of the secondary creditors, the international banks. And we've been able to throw together a government, a level of government, and administrate it from the highest possible position. But in order to make that work, to make it true, to make it right, we have to have the people come back to the land jurisdiction and actually take charge of their own business, operate their own government, as you folks are doing here today. Because the ultimate responsibility of Americans is self-governance. And we've kind of gotten into the habit of letting George do it and letting all of these foreign federal service providers do everything for us. And as they've been doing everything for us, they've also been stealing us blind. Now, the Constitution, I started out by saying there were 3 constitutions. Well, the missing constitution, the national constitution, is the one that has the word "for" in it. The territorial constitution is the one that we're all familiar with. And in 1868, they took that original constitution, which is called the Constitution of the United States of America, and they converted it from an unincorporated body to a corporation. So in 1868, they announced a new constitution, and it was called the same thing, the Constitution of the United States of America, and it didn't seem to be at all different, but it was. It had changed its nature. It was no longer a constitution that was an international treaty. They were now using an incorporated constitution that was actually the Articles of Incorporation. So the government went from being unincorporated to being incorporated. So that happened in 1868 with the territorial government. Then there's a third constitution that's called simply the Constitution of the United States. That's the municipal constitution. Now, those of you who have read the Constitution a lot know that Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 allows the Congress to provide a government for the city of Washington, D.C., for the district. So they have the right to run a plenary oligarchy as a city-state, an international city-state, and that's what they've done. Now, as incredible as this may seem, they created that, they incorporated it, and they have run all of these state-of organizations as municipal states on our land. So, for example, the state of Idaho, all capitals, that's a municipal state-of-state organization. And it's an oligarchy, completely subject to every whim of Congress. So now you begin to see, if you're a citizen of the state of Idaho, all caps, you're in a different jurisdiction than if you're a citizen of the state of Idaho, upper lowercase. And all of this gets very, very confusing. And it's confusing for the members of the government and for those who have been providing governmental services. It's as confusing for them as it is for us. I can't count how many conversations I've had with law enforcement and with lawyers who are just as confused as anybody else about this. So our entire country is in a state of confusion, almost chaos, because nobody knows who's on first. It's like that old joke, who's on first, you know? Who or what is on first? And in order to make any sanity of this, we all have to gain control of, first and foremost, our own stuff, our own names, our own property, and then move on, just as you are doing here, to regain control of your local county and state governments. Now, when we talk about republics, you'll see in the Constitution we are guaranteed a republican form of government. That is the guarantee for your county government. Your county government is your General Assembly level government. That's a republican. That is the female form of Latin. That means soil jurisdiction. Okay? Now, when you say the republic, and we all have republic states that we're owed, that's the male form of the Latin. That's the international jurisdiction of the land. Soil and land go together like mom and dad, right? Your soil jurisdiction and your land jurisdiction make up one continental jurisdiction. We never gave up one iota of any part of our land jurisdiction. So when you say you're standing on the land and soil of Michigan or Texas, that means something. That's a clear message to anybody that is standing in maritime jurisdiction or municipal jurisdiction or any of the delegated jurisdiction of the sea that, hey, I'm not in your jurisdiction. I don't owe it to you. I'm over here in Spain and you're in Germany. That's how big a distinction there is between.
I just want to bring that up. Okay. I'll be honest. I thought I actually just came up with that word, right? On the land. Alright? I have not heard it anywhere else but apparently from her. So, I really like that part. Because that's why, in my other videos, that's why I keep saying, I was never in anything, right? I was always on, right? Never in Odessa, Texas. I was on the land of Odessa, Texas. You know, and apparently, whatever judge she is, I did it correctly. Who knew?
Between the two. They are literally foreign with respect to us. They are here to provide governmental services. And if you look at Article 4 of any constitution, whether you look at the original national level constitution or the territorial or the municipal constitutions, you're going to see the same thing. Article 4 is going to say...
The one thing I do disagree with her on this, y'all, she says the original jurisdiction is the Constitution of the United States. Well, the original Constitution, excuse me, was Constitution for the United States. And again, they changed it in 1861 or something like that, probably around the time frame she's talking about. I can't remember exactly when. But the original Constitution really says Constitution for the United States, which makes sense if you sit and think about it, y'all. All right? If the Constitution belongs to the government, it's their contract, and they must have to fulfill these obligations to enter in available rights, then that means the Constitution is for the government. We keep yelling out our Fourth Amendment rights, R. No, we already had it. It's a guideline they have to use to be able to come across our freedom area, right? Because the Constitution is grounded. They're stuck. All right? They have a barrier. We have no barriers. As long as we do not commit harm upon another. We to live free. So I disagree with her on the Constitution of the United States. Okay, it's Constitution for the United States is the original. Sheesh.
Here to provide essential governmental services. The reason they're here to provide essential governmental services goes all the way back to the Revolutionary War and to the peace treaty that ended the Revolutionary War. When we were coming out of 8 years of war with the British Empire, we had a giant merchant fleet and no navy. And the Napoleonic Wars and the French Revolution and everything else was booting up at the same time. Remember that. The British were at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. They needed our American raw products, our lumber, our cotton. They needed all of that for their factories. And we needed to sell all of our produce and all of our products also, right? We needed somewhere where we could sell our goods. So we needed their market. We needed their Navy to protect our merchant fleet.
Okay. So to define this a little bit better, y'all, because we keep getting out of hand on the history, right? At this particular time, okay, everybody was British. Right? She kind of went with, there is a separation, but there was no separation at the time. They was all British. And even when we formed our own government, they was descendant of the British. Okay? That's the reason why back in the old days they called it redcoats. To define, not, oh, the British is coming, the British is coming. No, as the redcoats are coming, the redcoats are coming. Because they was British.
And both countries needed to do business with each other. So the Founding Fathers struck a deal. And that deal is encapsulated in the Constitution. Basically, they ought to provide 19 enumerated services. Those are called delegated powers. So those 19 delegated powers include control over commerce. The British government has had control over our commerce and over our trade policies since the founding of the country. They've also owed us duty. They owe every single one of us duty as our trustees on the high seas and navigable inland waterways. Okay? The way they've gotten around that duty and not paid that duty is by redefining us, one by one, as territorial citizens. Territorial and municipal citizens have no constitutional rights. They never have had. Not since the foundations of the country. So when they convert your status from being an American national standing on the state of Texas to being a foreign situs trust operating in the international jurisdiction of the sea, and they say that you're a citizen, that means that you have no constitutional guarantees. That's why when you go into U.S. District Court and you raise a constitutional argument, they'll look you right in the face and say, that has nothing to do with anything here. If you mention it again, I'll hold you in contempt.
That is absolutely true. So, apparently, this judge really understands what research I've done. And it's amazing that I come across her. You know, I guess she's been out for a while. I just never come across her. I did more paperwork studies in my earlier times than YouTube, and I just actually started really doing this YouTube pretty hot and heavy this past year or so, because I was been busy with my grandbaby and all that. So I didn't really have time to do the research I once did. So this is awesome. I'm tickled to death.
Court. That's because you have no guarantees. You have no guarantees at all. You have no constitutional rights as a territorial citizen or as a municipal citizen. And how do you know which one you are being addressed as? Well, it's the same style. The territorial states of states operate in upper lowercase, state of Washington. And when they use your name in upper and lowercase, they're addressing a territorial citizen.
Enhances when you ask them what jurisdiction I'm under, they will not answer because this crap here. Alright, well, I'm going to end it here, y'all. This will We the People News. Love this one. Bye, y'all.